everyone, and welcome back to Franchise Vibes, where we're going to discuss franchises and everything in between. And today, I'm excited for the topic that we're going to be discussing today, because today the vibes we're on is ownership vibes, from financial readiness to wealth building. And we're going to be speaking today with Katrena Pitts from Studio M, and she is a financial coach for small business owners. So I thought that this would be a great addition for and a great topic to speak about, because I don't think we necessarily talked about this part of readiness and owning a business, whether it's a franchise or not. So Katrena, welcome to Franchise Vibes.
Thank you, Tamika. Happy to be here.
Great, great. I'm so glad. And yes, again, thank you for joining us. And please tell us a little bit more about yourself before we get into some questions.
Sure. My name is Katrena Pitts. I am an accredited financial coach through the AFCPE. So I am an accredited counselor for small business owners. And we started our company, I started my company a little over a year ago. And in trying to figure out what I actually wanted to focus on, the sense of my clients, I've always loved personal finance, but also business. And so it seemed to make sense to bring the personal finance world into the business world for small business owners, and personal finance and being ready for that. And much of it starts honestly with my own challenges with money in my 20s. And I would suggest my story is not too different for most people in their 20s. Credit card debt, overdrawn in your bank account, maxed out credit cards, couldn't afford cookies in the food court of a mall the day before your birthday, and trying to figure out how you're going to celebrate your 21st birthday with no money is kind of a challenge, I'll be honest. But even working through that and moving through my late 20s and financial literacy through Dave Ramsey or through other, educators who do personal finance, figuring that out. And I turned to a volunteer in our community. I live in the Dallas area. And I did that on a volunteer basis for a local nonprofit here. And that was really sort of my first true, I'm taking all the information in, I've applied it to my own life, and now I'm helping other people do that as well. Where it really sort of clicked in my head of, I enjoy personal finance, financial literacy, those sort of aha moments that people have. And I know how to save, or I understand the purpose behind saving. It's not really the much of I need to save because they tell me to. It's I want to save because it's either something I want to do with my personal finances for me, for my family. In our case, what we're talking about here today, to start a business, or retirement, or insurance, right? Having the right insurance on your car or for your home, and what that actually means. So if ever the claim is done, what does that mean for you with the deductibles? All those different things that we hear about, but we don't actually educate ourselves on, so we can make really, really powerful decisions. So all of that, and having a background in micro enterprise, so that's 5 employees or fewer, helping people in my community who want to start a small business, working them through their business plan. So all the operations and management, marketing. So like I said, pulling those two things together, my love for personal finance, but also the business world, and putting that together. And that's kind of how you got Studio M Financial, and me at the helm of it.
You know what? I love that. I love that a lot. And it sounds like you're a person that even my audience or the people that I come across in my business should be speaking to before and possibly after launching their business. So I think there's a lot of alignment, especially when you talk to education, because I am very education first heavy, hence franchise vibes. So, so when someone says that they want to start a business or buy a business, what are the first financial indicators that you look at to determine if they're truly ready?
Sometimes it could be what saving, how are they going to pay for this? That's really the place that we start. 2 places that we start. 1, how are you going to pay for this? And 2, when do you really want to start this? And that sort of gives us the time frame, or at least a structure to figure out what resources do we have in the terms of if it's savings or extra jobs that we are working in order to save for the business, or retirement, or whatever, or we're getting a lump sum. Some people are getting lump sums from inheritances or settlements, or different things that they want to put that money towards. So really, how are we going to pay for this? But really, the biggest thing I want to know is, when do you want to start this? And if this is I hate my job, I want to start it tomorrow, then we're going to have some work to do, right? To figure out, the readiness of that. But if it's, I want to start this in maybe a year, okay, great. Let's talk about what the transition would look like from W-2 work for insurance, for retirement, And what would that look like for your family? What sort of dynamics are we changing? What sort of communication do we have for that? How are we actually moving out? What even things like what projects do you need to conclude at your current job to be ready to roll off that team and be able to make a transition out? Because I'm very much, even in my own personal story, I'm very much of a, it matters how you leave. It truly matters how you leave. And we want all of our clients to leave well so they can start well. So really, how are you going to pay for this, and what's the time frame? And then we can sort of reverse engineer it from there of what sort of, again, what resources do we need to get? Because it could be certifications that people need or licensures that people need to start their businesses. It doesn't really, in the sense of franchises, it doesn't really apply in that because there's no license to get other than being the franchisee, right? But that's a whole separate process. But if there's any certifications that people need, when do you need to get that? What cost is it going to be? What's the time frame for that? If that really is what's necessary to start it, let's bake that into our process so that we're not caught unaware the day you're leaving your job and you go, oh no, I forgot that I need this very important certification, and that's an 8-month project. And then we kind of start about cash flowing. How are we going to support our personal finances while we're waiting for our businesses to start? So there's a lot of things that I find important, but the main things are how you're going to pay for this and support your household. What's necessary is sort of the parenthetical, and then what's the time frame, and we can start working from there.
Yeah, you said a lot of important things, a lot of key things there. And it kind of reminds me of just even, just a mindset as well, right? So, so example, I see a lot of people, they get excited about ownership, but then when I start talking or when it gets to that step or that, in the process as far as funding is going to come in, that's when things kind of start to slow down and, they kind of pump the brakes and, things start, becoming a little more, they start becoming a little more aware of, whether or not they really have, the assets or can they really do this?
Sure.
So what mindset blocks do you see around money and risk?
I would say the biggest one, and maybe this is more of a me mindset that I see as well. Because honestly, there's a lot of things that I am walking sort of before my clients do, right? So in some ways, I'm kind of my own first client in a weird way, but the biggest thing for me is getting prepared on the front end for it to be longer of a process than what you think it's going to be. Meaning, if I start my business today, it's March, whatever. If I start my business today and I anticipate I'm going to have my first client in 30 days, what happens if that? How are you going to respond if that doesn't happen? How are you going to act if that doesn't happen? What is the plan if that doesn't happen? And really being in some ways okay with it. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean that you've made a misstep. It doesn't mean you've done anything that you should have fixed earlier. It really just means giving the process time to develop and evaluating the strategy. So I would say the biggest mindset is patience, giving yourself the opportunity and the space to let those strategies develop and then pivot, then to make the adjustments, because you have to get the data in, you have to get the information in so you can make an informed decision. So that's honestly mindset number one. It's more impatience and transitioning to patience, and just kind of settling into, you are starting a business. You are not trying to just make a sale. And I think there's a massive difference in that. The business takes a long time. The sale does not. So, really just getting into that is harder for myself included, right? I'm not going to exclude myself included, but I do think it's a long game in that.
No, I love the way you put that though, as far as comparing it from the sale to the business, So I love that. I don't think I've heard it that way. So that's,
I hadn't either until I just said it. So yay for both of us.
We highlight that. I know it's being highlighted on this video, y'all. We highlighted that. So, how should someone prepare financially before taking on business ownership?
Preparing financially, I would say, and I talk to a lot of my clients of what is it actually going to cost to start it? And do you know? And it's a little different in the franchise world because there is a much larger outlay for that than if you're starting your independent business. But I still think it applies. How much is it actually going to start you? Because there's two parts to this, right? There's the ramp up to the start that has its own expenses. And then it's the operation after you start, the actual moving through your business. Do you know what those two halves are? And if it's things like office space or inventory, at least get an idea of what that is and put a number,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's an estimate, right? Cargo or inventory, $5,000. Okay, and that means I need to have at least 5,000 to start, and then maybe another 3 or 4,000 extra to start. When inventory goes down, I have some replacement. So really breaking down those two parts, if that makes any sense. What do I actually need to start it? Where's that coming from? What do I need to continue? And where is
Mm-hmm.
that coming from? Because sometimes it could be savings, and then to operate could be retirement, or it could be retirement to start because it's a larger sum of money, and it could be savings to actually operate it because it's a lesser amount of money. So I don't know if that makes any sense or not in how I answer that,
Mm-hmm.
but really, what is it going to cost me? And I don't even mean employees. Maybe do I need them? What's the
Mm-hmm.
subscription that I may need for the software? Google it. What's the software for the payroll system, or what's the software for the subscription that I need? And if it's $15, put in $15. Just start writing it down. Because I think it goes back to your point you said a second ago. And when we start talking about money, it gets very real. When you start
Mm-hmm.
titling and listing all those things, and I just was talking to a client a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, write that stuff down. This is what you're trying to accomplish, and you need to know how much it's going to cost you. Write it down. How much is it to certify your business? How much is
Mm-hmm.
it to actually get it certified with the state that you live in? How much is it to actually get the certification? Start writing that down, because then you can kind of go, okay, this is going to take me, I'll make up a number, $10,000 to start the business. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sitting at 3,000. Where am I going to get the other 7,000 from? And that's where you can start making really powerful decisions. Is that
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to hold off on my job, leaving my job for another couple months because I can bank that 7 grand because I'm a high wage earner right now and I can have that, or there's profit sharing. Or is that maybe I need to do a little side gig, Uber, whatever, for another couple, this is going to be a while, but the point remains the same. Like, what are the things? Or am I going to procure a credit
Mm-hmm.
for that, a loan for that? You can start making better decisions because you've taken the time to just take a piece of paper and a pencil, start writing down what the actual cost that you think it's going to be, and you can start deciding from there, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes total sense. And just to let you know, like there's a lot of alignment, whether it's starting a small business independently or owning a franchise. I would say a lot of those things you said still applies, but the only difference would be that in franchising there's a document called the FDD, which is the franchise disclosure document. In that you would have like your item 7, and your item 19, where it's going to talk about the different financials. That's your financial performance. The item 7 is going to give the full investments and everything. So what we're talking about is the item 7, essentially, like
Gotcha.
everything that's going to be in there. So in the same sense, you still want to come with that same energy. You want to come
Yeah.
with that and take a look, like, is this something that, according to this document, does this make sense? And I talk a lot about that and the breakdown of that in my book as well, your franchise roadmap. But a lot of things that you're saying, that is what you should be doing coming into franchising as well. It's just that you would have a lot more of that information ahead of time so you would know, and kind of apply those things as we go. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yes. No, I appreciate the correlation because I know of the FDD and I know that there's very important, all of it's important. I'll just say that. But there's very important sections that people direct you that are specific to the finances, right? The royalties that you'll pay, the initial fees that you'll pay. So no,
Absolutely.
that makes a ton of sense. You are creating your own section 7. I love it.
Mm. What role should credit, liquidity, and emergency savings play before someone launches?
Okay.
I'm smiling because I'm like, that is something that is so key, and I do talk about, but I want to talk to the financial coach here. I wanted to come from you.
Let's take the emergency savings first, because I think that goes back to what we said earlier of where is this money going to come from, and what are you going to do if you don't make your first sale or first commission in the time that you anticipated? You're going to have to float it somehow. You're going to have to be able to pay for it somehow. And if
Mm-hmm.
our entire financial structure is predicated on debt and credit, then that's going to be a hard thing to sustain long term, right? Because you're going to have to pay that back. right? The credit card company or the bank is not just going to give you money and say, you know what, you're just a very nice young lady or a very nice young man. You pay us back whenever you can. That's not how
Take
that
your time.
time, right? Take the 45, it takes 6 months. That's not how that works. I mean, even the transfer fee has, transfer balance has a shorter time frame than that. But I would say the emergency savings is really, really key for both your personal finances and your business, because you are still trying to run your household and feed your family and take care of the utilities while you are building your business, right? So those are two very different workflows and cash flows, but you need money for both. So I would say the emergency savings, it may not be the primary thing, but it's whatever comes right under primary. Have that in place. So emergency savings. So I want to start there with that, because I do think that is what helps your shoulders go down as a business owner. Of if it doesn't go as planned, I can still take care of my family and my business, because cash flow is the biggest thing. So I would start with emergency savings. Then let's back up to liquidity. And I think that goes hand in hand, honestly, is do you have enough? Plus, if you had to pay extra for a for a repair, you had to pay extra, or you need to get a freelancer for a project that we were not anticipating, but could be really good for your business. How are you going to pay for that? There and available is really important. That covers not just the basics, but the opportunities that can come your way. So having money available for that. So I would say liquidity is number two. Debt. I have told people that I have a hate awareness relationship with debt. I am aware that it's a thing, but I don't love how reliant we are upon it, as if it's not real money that we ever have to pay back. We take it for granted and use it without discretion, without contemplation of the consequences of that, because we assume, and I'll put this in personal finance, and I think this will resonate, is I've heard many, many times, and I'll ask you this. I'll ask you, Tamika, have you ever heard someone say that you cannot travel internationally without a credit card?
That you cannot travel internationally without a credit card?
Correct.
I don't think I've heard that.
Okay. I've heard it multiple times that you have to have a credit card in order to travel internationally. I can tell you myself, I have traveled multiple times internationally with just my debit card and been just fine. So we have this sort of understanding that we take for granted, or we take it and adopt it as fact, that we cannot live any part of our life without credit. You'll always have a car payment. You'll always have this. You'll always have a mortgage. That's not necessarily true, right? If you certain decisions, certain choices that you make, and now take that into the business world. You're already trying to start something. You're already trying to build something. Why are we going to hamstring ourselves, tether ourselves, if you will, to an obligation that we may not necessarily need if we strategize correctly? Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Because I get it. And I do think credit has its place and it can be a tool, but what are we using it for? I guess that's the biggest question I would have on that is, yes, it is there and it's available as a tool for your business, but your reliance upon that could be the very thing that causes you to struggle even more than what you already were. So I mean,
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying just, you're not knocking credit complete. It's just to being strategic, I guess, to use it strategically.
that was a much more succinct way to say what I did. Yeah. Yes. Be strategic with it. Use it as a tool and know what you're using it for. Do not assume that it is a necessary thing. It is a useful tool versus a must-have. It is you can use this when necessary, but you don't have to. And I think we resort to the have to versus the when we need to.
Right. So it should be leveraged, right? Just use it as leverage for sure.
Correct. So start with what you can control, and that's in the liquidity and the emergency fund. And then because what you can't control when it comes to credit is you can't control when they tell you to pay it back. They're going to tell you. You can't control how much you're going to have to pay back. They're going to tell you that in the minimum payment. You can't control the terms of it, right? To the extent you're creditworthiness, you can't control the interest rate. You can't control the payment. You can't control the timing. So to the degree that you can keep as much financial control for your business as you can, do that. Only relinquish that control when you absolutely have to and you know why you're going to do it.
Okay. All right. So I guess this ties well into this next question is what mistakes do you see? Uh, what mistakes do you see once entrepreneurs start making more money?
They expand their budget at the same time they are making more money. So they don't actually realize the increase in the revenue because they're using the same amount of money. Excuse me,
Mm,
they're increasing the percentage of their using
mm-hmm,
as it grows. So you just have that sort of business inflation, if you will. You're
mm,
eating into your profits because you're increasing your expenditures as you, well, I'm making more money, so I can spend more money. I'm making more money, so I can spend more money versus I'm making more money. How do I use that extra money to my advantage? How do I help that money work for me? And I think you started this out with personal finance or wealth management, right? Or wealth
mm-hmm,
building. I think that's what you said, wealth building.
mm-hmm,
How do you
mm-hmm.
build wealth if you are constantly eating into the very tool that helps you to build it? So the biggest thing I would say for the biggest mistake, and I think this actually also happens on the front end for early business owners, having a bloated budget also and spending more money than necessary, but that
Mm-hmm.
we don't actually use that extra money, use that increase effectively. We just eat into it by bloating our budget more and more and more and more and more. So it's harder to build wealth. It's harder to accumulate and stack up cash when we're just burning through it at the same rate.
And I think you might have just answered, but maybe there's something you can elaborate on it because it transitions so well on this next question, which is how does lifestyle inflation quietly sabotage long-term wealth?
Same thing. It's the exact same thing. Because I mean, I have had very high paying jobs. It paid me well, and I can look back at budgets. I'm a nerd on this. I literally have budgets back to 2008, so almost 20 years ago, and I can go back and I can look. There's nothing wrong. Let me say this. There's nothing wrong with giving yourself a good lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Please do enjoy that you are making. Please, 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 please do. But be mindful that if your goal for increasing your revenue and your income, if we're talking personal, is to build wealth, be mindful of those things that will silently sabotage because it's just another $30, it's just another $100, it's just another 50. Well, you add that up over the course of weeks and months and years, thousands and thousands of dollars that you could have invested, that you could have saved, that you could have used for your benefit to build wealth versus maintaining a lifestyle that's going to change, that is transitory, that is one pair of shoes versus 1,000 pair of shoes. We lose the value of that at some point. And I like shoes, don't get me wrong. Don't go look at I like shoes, but it's the same thing. And I can look back at my own budgets and go, man, I see where I started increasing those expenditures because I was making more money. And then I have to
Mm-hmm.
sort of reverse that in some ways of going, that's not what I want to do. I want to use my money in other ways. I'm going to reverse some of that inflation. I'm going to reverse some of that bloat from my budget, and that difference, I'm going to save that because I really would prefer to do this. I'm going to invest it because I really would prefer to do this versus consuming all of it.
Well, Katrina, thank you. This has been an excellent conversation. I think it was absolutely needed here. Normally, at this point, I would have give us like a wrap up question, at this point. But I wanted to try something a little bit different for you. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking like a rapid fire, like a reality round. Are you up for that?
Okay, we're going to get the brain cells going. Let's do it.
All right. So first one, profit or revenue?
Profit.
Hmm. You want to talk about it?
Profit means that you actually took money home because revenue can easily be eaten up by cost. And that means you take nothing home if your costs aren't actually um, accounted for correctly. That kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, that inflation. If you're eating into all of your revenue, you have nothing to take home. I would rather at the end of the day know that I made money and I'm taking home money because my costs are covered completely with some leftover. So profit, 100%.
Credit score or cash reserves?
Cash reserves. You
Okay.
control that. You 100% control the cash that you have in reserves. Credit scores are dependent upon history, dependent upon utilization. There's far too many factors that go into that. I know I got money in the bank, able to cover it. Cash reserves.
So, guys, you heard it here. Katrina, again, thank you so much. And listen, guys, ownership is bigger than revenue, as we learned, right? It's discipline, it's stewardship, it's legacy. And if you're thinking about stepping into business ownership, make sure you're financially ready, not just emotionally excited. Again,
Correct.
Katrina, thank you so much for joining us on Franchise Vibes. everybody, if you would like to speak to Katrena because you're ready to come and speak to me, or maybe you already have your business and you need that, you need that coach. You need to go ahead and work these things through. Please make sure that you are reaching out to us, and Katrena will be more than happy to meet with you. Katrena, do you want to tell them where they can also catch you on?
Sure. You can catch me on Instagram at Studio M Fin, Fin, Studio M Fin on Instagram. You can find me on YouTube, Studio M Financial, and also my website, www.studiomfinancial.net. You can find me there.
All right. Thanks again for your time.
You enjoyed the conversation, Tamika. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining, everyone. Bye-bye.